Good evening, everyone. Uh, Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Today I'm really happy to have, of course, Samita, co-founder, CEO of Resilience, and Bhargavi, general partner, Java Capital. So really excited to be here, guys. And I know, of course, we've been interacting, but we thought it would be a, good idea to have, the entire audience learn more about resilience and what you've been up to. So maybe, Samita, I'll put, the question to you. Maybe the first point that you can, guide, maybe it'll be helpful for you to guide us through is what was the starting point of resilience, how it all came together.
No, fantastic. I know it's LinkedIn, and I know a lot of people are watching us. So a huge shout out to Kalari and Java for endorsing Resilience AI, because we understand number one, it is disruptive. It's in a space of disaster where, like healthcare, we don't like checking our health unless there is a casualty. And we've complicated the entire language of disaster and climate with AI, ML, and advanced technologies. So we have added complex layers to be able to simplify what we say is disaster. Resilience AI is a very purpose conversation for Dr. Anshu, Sandeep Reddy, who are my co-founders, and me. Dr. Anshu is on the front line for more than 30 years. He serves in the front line even today. Sandeep is at the front line of simplifying sustainability, which should not be a taboo, which should not be a standard. It should be a habit. And I believe that you cannot have humans at the helm of something as complex as disaster. It should be automated, it should be scalable, and it should be accessible. So we came together because we were grieving for the same point of how can we prepare and not respond to disasters. I know we'll still have to, but the lack of preparedness, not because someone did not have an intent for it, but just because there were not enough tools, modus operandi, enough amount of people to support disaster for a preparedness perspective, is where Resilience AI was born. Our inspiration still says 2021 cyclone Yas, Bangladesh impacted. West Bengal also felt the impact. And overnight, you saw industries such as textile, industries which were fisheries, livelihoods lost, and infrastructure like telecom towers, which take millions of dollars to build, lost overnight. And the only itch that we are solving for today is, what if we told you that that telecom tower were from the first place it was not supposed to be built there, because it is in a geospatial location based on the climatic science and based on the parameters of built environment. It was not supposed to be built there, or if it is built, it needs to be built in a different way. And that's the genesis of Resilience AI. It's a high-end smell test of not forecasting the disaster, but telling that if disaster is happening, what is the magnitude of risk or the exposure you have at your building level? How can you collate all of this and assess your business readiness at a business line of business level? And how can you take all of this to plan, action, and scale in an intelligent and informed manner?
Sure. No, that's really helpful. And I think a lot of interesting points that you just spoke of, right? But I think one area that maybe would be a really good starting point is to see how you guys look at quantifying, these climate events and the extremities that have been increasing, right? And of course, the approach where you say instead of reacting, we need to be more proactive to it. So there needs to be that kind of foresight into a lot of these events, right? And then it comes into for us to not just have that insight, but then to proactively put in certain measures. So how are you guys looking at, how would you quantify the extremities of these increasing, right? And how are we trying to productize this?
Okay, brilliant one. That's the essence of building Resilience AI. Is it should be accessible to any general manager, any asset owner, any investment manager. It should not need scientists, unless that is assisted scientists and experts in the room. They're always valuable to give you expert advice, but the first level of baseline should be in your power. So take control. How are we productifying? So it's a software. It's called Resilience 360. What does this software do? Very intuitively. The first step is we always believe, considering that I'm a risk auditor myself, and that's been my first step of the journey. If you do not baseline or measure your risk, measure the environment impact. What is the impact if tomorrow there is a cyclone and you have not baselined it? You don't know what to solve. So the first productifying version of Resilience 360 is we baseline for you. There is two kinds of conversation when we do the baseline that is emerging in the market. Why do you need it at a building level? We'll do it at a zip code level. That's enough. And we are challenging that hypothesis with two answers. And this is a very opportune moment because right now we are getting a lot of clarification and queries of why do you at all need it at a building level? Our answer is very simple. How many times have you spent your day on the road? You spend your day in buildings, and that does not discriminate a worker who is working in a construction site and the individual who is working in an office space, in a 4-story office space. It does not discriminate. Our lives start and end in buildings. And if you don't know your building risk, you are not going to be able to take any action at a building. Fun fact, 82% plus damages during the disaster does not happen on the roads. It happens inside the building, which means measuring the risk at a building level rather than a zip code level is absolutely important for you if you want to protect your business, if you want to protect your people, and very importantly, you want to protect your profits. So we have productified at a building level, which we call is a hyper local level assessment. We complement this product with business preparedness, where we give a 55 parameter health check. The telemetry that we have done after the launch in March is people are taking 22 minutes to 60 minutes to complete that score. It's called REST score. What does it do? The world is flooded with a lot of standards. ESG is a framework. There are multiple standards like TCFD. And then there are principles or guidelines which are given by Sendai. We don't have a mandate. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no ESG mandated structure. We have improvised our structure for net zero emissions by defining scope 1 to scope 3. We are improvising in resilience AI the definition of physical risk across these standards or institutionalizing these standards because we believe that a customer at the other end is not a standard expert. The customer and the buyer at the other end, who can be a plant manager or an asset manager or a lending officer in a bank or a credit risk officer in the bank, is not a climate scientist, a hydrological scientist, a weather forecast scientist. So if we have to first tell you, how are you performing with respect to the standards that are institutionalized in the world or the frameworks that are institutionalized in the world, you need to have a very simple, intuitive tool. And that's the second product, and we have productified it. In the plan segment, Jairaj, the way we have designed, and a huge amount of credit goes to Bhargavi because she has been anchoring this conversation with us, is why is the high a high? Now that I know that my building is at a high or at a moderate risk, or now that I know my business resilience score is 28 on 100, what does it mean for me as a business user, as a city owner, as a local authority owner? And your persona can be varied. So we have defined REST suite, which is a suite of reports where we detail out why the high is high at an asset level, at a 10 square kilometer diameter for your neighborhood. And we've given all those combinations by profiling it individually for your asset, individually for your neighborhood, and individually for your district. And that level of customization we have built in the REST suite. We've also complemented it with Res Atlas, and it is accessible to you in 72 hours. You let us know the location. We light it up in 30 minutes in your product tool called Resolve or in the Determine module. From Determine, when you migrate to Plan, you get the report in 72 hours, something which takes us more than 3 months. And then we are saying, hey, you know what? You also need to know your environment impact for your audits, because I know you're doing a site assessment audit before construction. Can we give you the water atlas, the solar propensity atlas, the vegetation atlas? And all of these are complementary to your reports. to your diagnosis of why the high is high and what is the level of maturity. We are right now at a stage of actioning, and that is something that we request all our customers who are current and who are prospect to watch out for that space where we'll automate and tell you the so what can you do about it. That's why we have
I'm
product behind it.
I'm gonna come back to that, and especially on the building level piece. But maybe I thought, of course, Bhargavi and you have known, each other for a long time. So Bhargavi, I think for broadly, in your opinion, across climate tech, what we've seen across a lot of different players, right? And it'll be lovely to have your opinion. Where I at least feel in the limited time that there is this reactive approach to a lot of different things, and more than anything, while tech and product is a problem to solve, but there are barriers that exist even from a culture standpoint to kind of change that. So how did your thesis align? And of course, you having interacted with Samita and what you're seeing in the market, what is your take on that?
You are right. I think still some of this is looked at as a vitamin, right? Not as something critical, life saving. But um, I think it should not again become like, hey, India missed the curve in taking climate actions. When we look back after 10 years, that this is something which we should have thought about 10 years before prior, right? So I think we are actually at that stage, and these are things which need their time to be planned by organizations. Like Samhita says, right, you cannot look back, hey, I should not have put my warehouse in this location after you have spent millions and acquired the property and constructed it. So it's too late. I think that's why some of these now, the cultural maturity is required to move towards looking at these as standard procedures rather than looking at nice to have. I think that is the broad thesis on everything related to climate. Of course, when it comes to climate products, what I always tell is you cannot go to a customer by saying that I am good to environment. I think the product has to talk for itself and it has to stand on its own leg. And I think that is where some of the product maturity is going towards, be it product like resilience or physical products or alternate materials, anything. Right? I think that is the long term way to go towards this, and I'm happy to see those trends coming, not just from India but also from US with recent changes that has been happening in the US. Now coming to resilience specifically, we are a deep tech focused fund and climate focused fund, and we look at opportunities which are at the intersection of both of this. Coming to resilience in particular, we thought that this is a company which was in the overlap. So this sector and the segment was very relevant for that, for us. And the team had great domain fluency. So they are people who had the ability to not just build a solution but also influence regulation in this domain. And I think that is something which was very interesting with resilience team. They spent a lot of years in building that, and they know what they are doing, and that is showing up in the product depth. And looking globally outside in viewpoint, I think India is in a well poised scenario to be the supply chain hub for the world. Now we will see a lot of supply chain depth coming up in different sectors which has not been there in India. For example, semiconductors, right? If you're going to put up a semiconductor plant, you need something like resilience as core, because this is something which you're going to build for the next 50-60 years. So and I think that way it's going hand in hand with everything else which has been driving our thesis in deep tech.
Sure. No, thanks for that. And I think so. Even on the point for, again, before we go into the building level, and you talked about the examples, even the semiconductor plant or any of these large investments that are, yet to be done. First thing is whatever is already established, how can companies, enterprises be more aware of the risk that they face with extreme climate changes. But the second part is even on the newer investment. So Samita, what have been some interesting projects that you guys have had a chance to already contribute to and work with?
No, well, that's we have been very humbled with the opportunity we got through few of the boutique firms in India. They work in depth with in disaster as a segment. Climate is a very broad word in our world, so we call it as environment impact and disaster management. I mean, that sector, there are very few who have worked throughout the entire life cycle management of disaster. And disaster is a life cycle. It does not start with relief and recovery. It starts with first understanding awareness about if it happens. Remember the training that we used to have in school. If there is an earthquake, you have to stay under an asset. And those are principles that were taught to us. So there's a lot of awareness and behavioral conversation that happens. So disaster starts much before disaster happens. And hence, it is a life cycle approach to tackle the conversation. Hence, we call this as disaster management, or we call this as environment impact management. Now, in this world, when we go forward with the entire nuance of why we do it at a building level and why we take the entire dialogue with customers. We have customers such as where we have supported a channel partner to be able to evaluate railway stations in Jammu and Kashmir in full stretch. And what we did was the output from this product was used as an assessment tool of the stations before the construction was happening or while the construction was getting laid out. It's golden nuggets because it helps you design your entire rail line or the link rail accordingly. The second kind of customer that we have was, I always say buildings does not need to be large structures and townships. It can be a small housing. It can be informal settlements, which are very dense settlements and very much looked at in India and global south. We don't have a pattern in construction. And when we construct, we don't usually have, other than the administrative map, there is nothing much you follow. You have a very simple land use map approval. You have the permits on the basis of the boundary, and that's it. You get the approvals done. So because of the fluidity in the way structures are growing up and mushrooming as urban hotspots, semi-urban hotspots, what we realized is dense settlement is a very good place to study. We've studied Delhi, Vivekanand camp, and used the model to be able to do the assessment of that area. And this is one of the papers that has got published through our channel partner, and we are grateful to the channel partner to give us an opportunity to map Vivekanand camp as an area of interest and give you how buildings which are adjacent to each other, you are in building X and building Y, your exposure to heat is high, whereas your adjacent building is at low. And those revelations are very important. Why is it important? Because then the Vivekanand camp dwellers know which structures need frugal innovation, like a cool roof, and which structures are already well designed, even if topographically they are in a similar zone. So that's the second project we have done. We have also done a project for one of the state governments, which attracts a tourist location by the Ganges. And this was again for a channel partner where we mapped the city, which has a tourist location in the state. And what we did was we showcased the risk on the coast, because that's where most of the establishments start getting designed at the time of the tourism event. It's a large scale event similar to the Kumbh. And they gave us that area to scan and say which are the vulnerable areas, which structures are vulnerable, so that they can prepare it beforehand, before the tourists arrive during that part of the season. So that was another great project. In the last 3 months, I must say, the pride for us is we've run it for a Japanese corporation with a portfolio of asset, which is warehouse and manufacturing plant in remote Gujarat and in Bhuj, as well as in Bawal in Haryana. We have run it for a Canadian firm with a portfolio of cold chains and office spaces in Canada. We have run it for Sao Paulo in a hilly terrain of Brazil. And we have also mapped Alfred, the cyclone in Australia last month, for Brisbane in our model. Today, we are at a place where I always give an analogy of healthcare. Before a drug is launched, the power of the drug or the testament of the drug is given by clinical trial records. They're registers, they're unique data records of true positive, true false negative, true negative. What we have today is more than 730,000 buildings register, risk register of these buildings. And this, we say, is a moment of pride because they are ground truthed, they deliver at 90 to 96% accuracy, and they are mapped for 6 types of hazards all over the world, not just in India anymore.
No, that's very interesting, and which also brings me to maybe a slight point that you made that there is you worked on projects outside India and some within India. Again, has there been a difference in approach that you see from a customer standpoint, right? Also, maybe you could also highlight for some of the audience, what are some of the parameters that you bring out for these customers when we try to index risk?
Okay. Lovely. So the first one is with respect to customer adoption. We are still at an early stage. I must admit that we are literally in the market for the last 5 months in terms of demoing the product. We took 2 years to build the product, and the product is at a maturity there where 2 patents are already filed. We came in the market with fundraising, and gracefully we have tremendous amount of success with both of the companies that are there on the conversation. And today, in the last 5 months, we have done 154 demos so far, and we are seeing adoption. We are seeing there is no customer which has turned back and said, "Hey, I'm not interested." They're saying, "Can we sign an NDA? Can you give us a demonstrated report?" Okay, great. Can you do the pilot for a small cost for 1 or 2 assets of mine? So they have started experimental, not a single demo where we have seen that go back, I'm not interested. So that is, I see, as both of you alluded to, an adoption. It might take time, but building level risk assessment and business preparedness is becoming a critical conversation. One of the questions that I asked to a customer that as to why are you even keen, because we understand this is not a mandate, this is not a global priority for you, it's not a management priority for you, it is not even your KPI. The customer said it very nicely that I just lost my plant in Sikkim, and before I lose other plants, which are, Sikkim is just one of my plants, I will lose my production, I will lose my entire warehouse flexibility, and hence all my suppliers, and this needs to be mapped before I lose more money. The cost of inaction is hitting the books of these companies, it is hitting the books of governments, and there is tremendous amount of conversation and adoption that we see from both the sectors. On the hyper-local risk assessment, it is a patented product, so as much as I am allowed to disclose in this room, I will. There are 3 kinds or categories of data sets that the machine has been trained for. The heroine of this company is Resilience 360. And I always say that the machine has been trained on the basis of these 3 categories. Today, we are at 24 data sets. We started off with 3. We started with Cyclone and 3 data sets only when we started training the machine on the algorithm that we designed. 24 is a huge number. And every time we draw an inference, it's a new data set inference. Not necessarily it makes it better, but sometimes we astonishingly get surprised. Okay, this one is making the accuracy go up in terms of my segmentation, in terms of my classification of the building. These 3 categories of data sets are: number 1, the typical climatic parameters like temperature, precipitation, wind speed, rainfall. The second parameter or category of parameter or data sets are where we call them spatial parameters. Spatial, like the slope models, the vegetation index. We use all those and integrate them. Propensity to or proximity to river, proximity to a water body. What's your drainage system? Those are the information that we have in the spatial parameter. And the last, which is the icing on the cake, as we call it, or the differentiation, is we have mapped more than 14 types of structures based on their building material and the roof typology. The amount of studies we have done, we have identified there are 17, and 14 of the types, or we call them the types of structures, have been mapped in our model. And this has been tested in the last 28 disasters for inference checking. The machine today is smart enough that you give us any location, the way you add your location in your Google map, you add a point A that you have to travel to point B, your current location to. It's as intuitive as that. You just add your location. Don't bother about latitude, longitude, any complication, and we will light up that location for not just your asset, but for the neighborhood asset of 1 square kilometer into the zones that we say, which means which building is at high, which building is at moderate, which building is at low, and give you a legend-based structured analysis of how many structures in your neighborhood are high, how are you different. It's like giving you a power check, like the smart meter analysis. You are consuming 200 watt, but hey, you know what? Your neighborhood is consuming less. Save your energy. So those kind of checks and balances and fun way of using the product has been inbuilt into Resilience 360.
Thanks for that.
Jairaj, I have a question for Samhita.
Sure.
So, Samhita, take 3 customer types, which is your ideal customer type, and why don't you tell the use cases for them, or why should they try your Resco today? Right. So, any 3 your top customer type, which ideally you think are ready and should use it, and why?
Brilliant one. This is my favorite question. I always wish somebody asks me this question because this means I'm sketching the canvas. Thank you so much, Bhargavi, for the question. The first ones that I definitely insist are banks and financial institutions. Reason I say banks and financial institutions, every bank and financial institution has 2 things. Number one, they have an internal climate stress testing model, which is called the disaster stress testing model. And they have their own RAMs, the risk and assessment models. Both of these right now have 2 gaps. The first gap is they're not at a building level. So what happens if you don't do at a building level? You design your loan book on the basis of a region. For example, Whitefield is a region for you. And based on spatial information, which is at a zip code or a full ward level of Whitefield, you said Whitefield is a high risk area. The miss out is your loan book is not growing because you just missed out one of the highest value assets right now that are getting built up in Whitefield. Just because you said Whitefield is a high risk zone and that's what your RAM model gives away. And that's because what your climate stress testing model has not factored in, which is the built environment intelligence. So we say that increase your loan book with us because we don't just tell you if it is complied and disclosure. We tell you what are you not missing out in that region, which assets are or which assets can be a high propensity good loan book for you. It's healthy. The second thing that banks and financial institutions are missing in these 2 models is factoring in disaster risk at a hyperlocal level. And why we say that you should factor in, when you have a high value asset, you cannot just depend on reserves or provisions. You need to have the right insurance. 95% of the risk officers that we have spoken so far, which means 95 out of 100 people that we have spoken so far, they say there is a need of this, but hey, I don't know how to integrate it with my RAM model. But hey, I don't know how to create the insurance, which is more than a general insurance cover. Because I don't want to depend on provision, but I don't have the methodology to do it. We are saying we have the methodology now. Allow us to plug and play in your RAM model and in your climate stress testing model. So we complete your assessment. The simple gap that you have left out in the current models, we complete it with built environment. You increase your loan book, you hedge your risk for the high value assets. Both are possible. The second use case that, and is my favorite because I come from industrial as a segment, is supply chain and manufacturing plants. If I tell you that we did a bottom-up research of all the assets or companies that have at least communicated that they have lost in the last 2-3 years to disasters, there are large pharmaceutical companies, there are large manufacturing companies of cameras, Brazil's coffee plantation. Now, why do we say that supply chain and manufacturing plants need to get this assessment done while they have the plant so that they can strengthen it and before setting up the plant and the warehouse so that they can prepare? It's not that if it is a high risk zone, you don't have to set up a warehouse. You have to strengthen your asset. You strengthen your warehouse. There are fixes around. Otherwise, the world will be left with no buildings because eventually Earth is metamorphosizing. The myth that supply chain and manufacturing plant industries are forgetting is the cascading effect. the hit is on their P&L. Huh? The hit is on their financial statements. If a plant goes out, means production goes out. If the suppliers stop supplying, means your yield is not there for that time being. Loss of production is equal to loss of revenue. Simple. I mean, that calculation, anybody who is even studying an undergrad can tell you that loss of production is loss of revenue. And loss of revenue for a decent amount of time, even if it is for 3 days consecutively, is loss of profit. So forget the conversation of anything. This is one of the most important things that they must think. Are they willing to bear the hits on the profit? Are they willing to ignore the cascading effect on, if coffee production does not happen, prices go up? Huh? So it's a double-edged sword. So that's the second use case where I say manufacturing and supply chain industries, heavy industries, should do it. And anybody and everybody who manufactures, the manufacturer of a pin to the manufacturer of a wind turbine, all of them should have this as part of their site assessment as an ongoing effort for existing and new assets, because both has relevance for their P&L designing and both have relevance for how they budget in their AOP. The third use case, which is emerging very heavily right now, as we see into the conversation, we see a pivot from what we used to call city resilience to what today has become community resilience. Can we build a way that authorities have an early access to which are my neighborhoods, which buildings in my neighborhood as a ward officer or as a city governor are most exposed? Because then I take the insurance pool accordingly, because that's our VAR. We have a product called value at risk, which gives you an asset level, not just the risk of climate or the exposure of disaster, but we also complement it with what is the value at loss for you if you don't take any action. So they take this as a intelligence format of what should be my insurance pool looking like, what should be my intervention budget looking like, or which we call mitigation budget looking like, so that before the disaster happens or before the natural disaster strikes, you are prepared at an individual structure level where actually your communities or people live. And this is the third use case that we see constantly emerging right now.
Got it. Okay. So banks and financial institutions, manufacturing and supply chain, and people who are running cities.
Thank you for summarizing. Yeah, no, I think so. There was a question from the audience which was around supply chain. So, thanks for, addressing that as well. I think one final question rather that I would want to put, and again, probably will how you see the next 10 years, right, for this industry. Right now, even enterprises are probably at that early stage of integrating such productized solutions. And I want to connect it with the latter part, which is the adapt part that you talked about, in terms of what do you see, and this could be more generalized, right? Like what are some strategies that would become far more common for these the adaptation that you also look at wanting to help customers do?
Okay. Adaptation starts with adoption. So I always say first adopt a way that you can intelligently assess and plan for your assessment. The industry 10 years is quite an impressive horizon. I have mixed feelings about it, and we should do a part 2 of this conversation for the mixed feelings. Today's feeling of the day, as part of the moment that I live in, I see decently reactive approach even today, where we have to run that extra hustle of explaining why cost of inaction is hitting your P&L, why cost of inaction is hitting Department of Revenue in a government. Both the conversations are equally a hustle. What we aspire to have is the way you have automated delivery of your products, and you have that itch for instant delivery. Why not have an itch for future-proofing your buildings and future-proofing your business? I know it is not a weekly hustle. It's not a daily hustle. A daily, you're not thinking today where the groceries are going to come from. This is not a daily hustle, but I always flip the script and tell all my potential customers and my current customers, what if I tell you that if disaster happens, it will become a daily hustle? It will become your minute hustle. You won't step out of the house the way it happened in COVID. Have you ever thought of it? So I leave that thought for the 10 years horizon, that don't wait for an itch to happen until nature is just not kind, because we have caused what has come out of nature today. Prepare your businesses, prepare your cities, and have that itch for it, the way you have an itch for instant coffee. Otherwise, this adoption or even the conversation of adaptation is not going to happen. Adaptation is a function of two things: prepare and protect. Very simple words. You prepare your people, you prepare your profits, you prepare your assets, and protect means you protect all three of them with equal rigor and equal intention. And that adaptation is not going to happen until you feel the itch. As in any avatar of yours, either at your home when you're searching for a home, for a real estate asset, on any of the Zillows and the 99 acres, or when you're defining the AOP for your office space or your warehouse or your cold chain, it should appear at that time. That would be my definition of adoption to adaptation.
No, I beautifully put, and I think it's fair to say that we definitely, feel the itch, and of course we're extremely happy to be, working with you on this. So once again, thank you, Samita, thank you, Bhargavi, to join us here, and I thank the audience to have stayed with us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for organizing this. Nice talking to both of you. Bye bye.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you, guys.
Time
Thank
for
you.
me to go have my coffee.
Yes. Good morning.
Bye.
Bye bye,
Cheers.
folks.